All right. Hey, everybody, and welcome to another Learning Tech Talks, where we are continually exploring the landscape of technology as I live life at the intersection of business, tech, and the human experience. Today is going to be a little bit of a veer from my usual conversations, although I would say the same is true from a lot of my recent conversations. Today, I'm talking cybersecurity with Benjamin Netter. He's joining me all the way from Paris, France. And we are going to dig into this topic because not only is it always been an important topic in the digital age, but I think as you're going to see with where AI is going and all of this stuff, this is just going to become an even more important topic. So I'm looking forward to it. Thanks so much for joining me, Benjamin.
Hey, Christopher. Thanks for having me.
And right before we went live, the best part is, and I have to ask you about this, I asked, do you go by Ben or Benjamin? And you said, well, in the US, it's Ben, but outside the US, it's Benjamin. And I go by Christopher. So I appreciate when people go by the long version. Is that just a cultural thing? Do people in the US just shorten names?
Yes,
okay.
they do. So I adapted. So now I'm Ben in the US.
Okay. Got it. All right. Well, that's what I was curious about because I deal with it all the time where people shorten it and they always call me Chris. And I've just started saying I'm not Chris, I'm Christopher type of a thing. So there you go. You can take a tip from me and just let people know it's not Ben type of thing. So
Ben is fine. I like it.
Okay. Well, see, if you like it, then that's totally cool. But I don't like Chris. So, all right. So little bit of background into this. We're talking about cybersecurity, which for those of you who are watching or listening to this now or at some point, I know we all have our perceptions of what that is. We're going to unpack that a little bit to hopefully help break down what that really means. But before we do, Benjamin, what's your background and how did you end up going the cybersecurity route? Was this something you were always interested in?
I'm not sure. I mean, my background is technical, so I've been coding for 20 years now.
Okay.
And Riot is actually my second company, and my first company, we were doing loans for small businesses, so completely not related.
So loans for small business. And did you build a technical platform for that? Is that what the previous company
we did? We actually did $1 billion worth of loans. So yeah.
So this was no small deal.
No. It was a decent company, and I mean, I was CTO, so I was in charge of maintaining this platform that was handling hundreds of millions of euros worth of transactions every year.
Okay.
So you went. It's pretty stressful.
Okay.
Stressful.
But technically speaking, you always had more of the technical bent. Did you go to school to do software engineering and stuff?
I did. I did 5 years of studying. I have a master in software engineering.
Okay. So that was the path you took. Then you get into small business loans, grow a company to $1 billion of transactions. Then that sells. And then you go, you know what? Enough of this loan stuff. I'm going to do cybersecurity. How did you make that shift?
That's not how I went. So basically, I was in charge of maintaining this platform with my team, and I'm pretty sure that a hacker would find a clever way to hijack the money from the platform. And we were spending a lot of money on protecting the platform, like investing in pen testing and AppSec and so on. And what happened is an employee, we had 110 people in the team. What happened is that an employee ended up receiving a phishing mail and entering its password. And so that's how we actually got breached. Because an employee was not properly trained for phishing attacks. And I realized that I was investing on the wrong part of the company, and
got it.
Hackers are much more pragmatic than I thought. Instead of finding clever ways to actually hack a platform, you can just send an email or
the social engineering just use their biggest vulnerability, which is the employees.
Exactly. It's like much more scalable business than trying to find a clever way to hijack the money from a
So prior to that experience, I'm actually curious, prior to that experience as the CTO, had your primary focus on protecting the technical stuff, had it primarily been around securing the servers, securing the transactions? Had it been more around that? And then did it kind of catch you off guard when it was like, oh, like all this is secure, and here this one person gets a clever email and then ends up giving away the keys to the castle?
I mean, it makes sense too, because we hired those people, and you think that you're working with very clever people, and they're still very clever. They're just not properly trained. But I was not imagining that they would click an email that's so obviously a phishing email and enter their passwords. But they were just not properly trained. I was doing it the old way. I was gathering everyone in a room and talking about cybersecurity for an hour.
Okay.
And that's pretty
so
much
that
it.
was the traditional approach, was like, hey, everybody, like, just make sure you don't do this type of a thing. I'm sure they won't. They're smart people. We've hired some of the best. They're technical. It's not going to happen. And then it happens.
Exactly.
Okay.
It happened.
So got it.
After 5 years. I mean, it took 5 years.
Well, yeah, no, I get it. It's not like it's something that's happening all the time, but again, it happens. And how big of an impact did it have?
Not so much, because what happened is the hacker got access to the employee's inbox and sent an automatic message right away to all his contacts, including me. And it was like a Tuesday morning, early, like 11 a.m. I got this email, and that was obviously phishing. And so I ran to the office of the person who clicked the email and saying, what did you do? What happened? And 10 minutes later, it was fixed. But it can be much more dangerous.
Oh,
and I understood that starting Riot and hearing about scary stories all the time.
That's great. Well, and so how fortunate. I mean, that was their fatal mistake. It sounds like they got a little greedy with it. They're like, hey, perfect. We got this person's email. Now let's just email everyone in the company and see if we can't fool anybody. And then you caught it and we're like, hang on, we got to.
Yeah, exactly. That's how it went.
Okay. And so then after that, you're like, you know what? Next venture, I'm starting a cybersecurity company.
No.
No?
I thought, you know what? Maybe there's other people in the company that would click. And I thought, why don't I just launch a phishing attack? And so I started working during the weekends and early in the morning on what will be Riot. So Riot started as a side project. I mean, I thought maybe I should send an attack on the whole team and see how they behave. And the first person who clicked when I launched the attack was the CFO. And
whoa. Okay.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. So then I was telling the story to other CTO friends, and they told me, I want to try it. I want to try it on my team. I want to see how they behave, if they click. And that's how I realized that Riot was not a side project. It was a company.
Okay. So because obviously that company, you're not there anymore. So then you started Riot, your side hustle turned into a full-time gig. What is Riot then? So what do you specifically focus on with Riot?
So we focus on the security of employees at large. So we started as a phishing simulation program, and what we were doing is launching phishing simulation attacks on employees. And what we realized is that we were solving a problem, knowing which employees are the most vulnerable ones. But we were also creating another problem. How do I train them now that I know that most of the time?
Yeah, because it's one thing you get busted and you're like, oh, okay, we've got this issue. But then it's like, what do you do about it?
I mean, so launching the first campaign is always free with Riot. So we launch the attack, and usually 20% of the employees then end up clicking and entering their password. And
Really?
Now you're facing how many people work in your company, Christopher?
6,000, 6,300, something like that.
That's a lot of people.
A lot.
So if I launch an attack on your company, there would be probably 1,000 people that would click enter their password. That's the average.
That's the average when a company does this. 20% of people go for it.
Yeah. So now we're facing another problem.
I would have never imagined that percentage of people would actually click on it. I would have thought it'd been single digits at the most.
It's not, unfortunately. So now you have
Wow.
another problem. You have 1,000 people that you need to train. So that's why we thought and reflected on how we can actually change the way we teach to employees.
Okay.
And
All right.
we created a cybersecurity companion called Albert that you can easily plug on your Slack or Microsoft Teams systems. And Albert is will teach to each employee directly the basics of cybersecurity
Got it.
in a new and clever way. So
Okay.
that's the
Well,
second
and I
part of
want to
Riot.
unpack that. I want to unpack that in a little bit, but because I think your point is spot on in terms of this is one of those, I had no idea, because I get those emails, and for me, they just stand out like a sore thumb. So in the back of my head, I've always thought, oh, who's really clicking on this stuff? But I
So
see a lot of stuff where you go,
you're
well,
probably
somebody
part
is.
of the 80% of people who are not clicking and think that those tests are ridiculous
Okay.
when they're not.
Well, and I think that's where we'll get to the learning part of it because but I do remember what's funny about this. I remember a time where it wasn't an email attack, but I got a phone call from the credit card company. And I remember just, I was in a hurry. That's the thing. And I almost feel like that's one of the biggest dangers is when you're in a hurry, you're not paying attention. And I remember I got this phone call. It was the bank. They were the right bank and whatever. And they said, hey, we've had some suspicious activity. We need you just to give us some information that we can validate these. And I'm just running around multitasking. And then they asked for the card number. And I got 4 digits in and I went, wait a minute. I caught myself and I went, why do you
Yeah.
need my credit card number? That's interesting. And the person on the other line, they had some excuse as to why they needed it, but I challenged them on it. And then I started playing with them and messing with them. And I remember they got really frustrated because I was like, well, why don't you tell me your credit card number? And then they got really irritated and then hung up the phone. But I think anybody can be vulnerable to this kind of stuff because all it takes is you're just not paying attention.
And so how did they know which bank you were using?
That I have no idea. To this day, I still have no idea how they. So that goes back to unpacking some of the cybersecurity stuff that I actually would like to spend a little bit of time on. I mean, if you've got your hypothesis how they got it, I'd
I
love to
do,
hear some of that. Yeah, well, let's hear it because this is the kind of
but
stuff that.
maybe there was a breach at the bank,
Okay.
and I don't know your bank, and obviously we're not going to talk about your bank, but
You
some
want me to
banks
give you my
they
account
had
number and my
breach.
PIN while we're on the live stream?
And I'm not going to try that.
Yeah.
I'll wait for later to
That's
actually
right. You
try it.
send me an email
But,
after this stream and see
I'll
if I
send you
give
an
it to
email.
you.
Exactly. No, but so probably a breach happened at the bank, and hackers are leveraging that to target you
Okay.
with
So they
phone.
probably got a list of names of some sort and were able to see these are all the people that have it, maybe some contact information.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's actually something else that we do. We actually scan when a new breach, when an employee appears in a new breach, and we're notifying the employee. So we're using this
Oh, really?
cybersecurity companion, and we're pinging the employee saying, "Hey, just so you know, you appeared in this bank data breach, and
So
what it
almost
means
like
to
credit monitoring. You're actually monitoring kind of the space in terms of where breaches are happening so that you can kind of give people a heads up. Like, we don't know if anything's going to come of this, but you should be aware that your name showed up in some of this stuff. So you're more vulnerable than you might have been before.
And we're actually predicting what will happen, and so we're warning the employee about the risk. So let's say your phone number leaked. We're telling you that it's likely that you will get a phone call, a phishing phone call. So
Okay.
you'll be targeted by a phishing attack. So phishing over phone call.
So again, going back to awareness is a big piece of it because you're at least cognitively aware, like, hey, you're at a higher risk because this thing just happened. So be overly cautious because you may get a phone call and somebody may be asking you for information that they have no business asking about.
Exactly, and that's actually our secret sauce is that we captured data on the employee, and we target the content based on that. So that was actually a good example, because we're not just saying, hey, this is what data breach looks like. We're saying, hey, Christopher, you've been in this data breach, and this is what it means for your safety, and this is what you should be aware of.
Okay. So
So
you're
we're
going
adapting the
beyond,
content.
yeah. Well, which I think a lot of times when I think about corporate, and this is really helpful for folks who may be listening, is you're thinking about your cyber strategy for this kind of stuff. A lot of the approaches that I've seen in organizations when it comes to cybersecurity is, like you said, either there's some sort of like annual, either live or online training that's like, hey, here's a bunch of information. It's not necessarily even contextualized. You're just kind of like, okay, whatever, go through it, answer the few questions, and then close out your thing. But you don't really understand the space, especially because a lot of people are not technical. So they don't really understand, like we just talked about, how all these things are interconnected, and something that may seem completely innocuous this could have effect on you, to raise awareness to it.
And it's actually, it's actually a real problem, because so when we created this module on data breaches, we realized that there was not a lot that you can do when you appear in a data breach, actually. You're not going to change your phone number because it leaked.
Right.
So we're not going to do, because we're trying to do the extra mile. We could have said, hey, Christopher, because your phone number leaked, we can change it for you. We can, but we're not going to do that. And
no, because phone numbers, you think about it, your phone number,
it's over.
It's over. You change your phone number, you're just lost a whole bunch of people in your life, because you're going to forget how to get a hold of them, and then you're never going to hear from them again.
You don't change your phone number anymore. Probably 15 years ago, you were changing every year, but it's not the case anymore.
No, I think about it. Up until recently, I still had my phone number from, I think, when I was in college, just because it was one of those, I don't want to change this because that's the phone number everybody has associated with it. So yeah, to your point, just because your phone number leaks, you're not going to call AT&T or Verizon and go, I need a new phone number, because you can't.
You're not gonna do that. Yeah.
Okay.
So you're just your risk is like increasing, and that's it. And you just have to be aware of it.
Okay. So let's unpack this a little bit, because some of the stuff we're talking about, I would say, is not necessarily, people may be familiar with phishing and stuff like that, but when folks think of cybersecurity, it's a much more diverse space than I think is often credited. I have a friend, he's a pen tester, and he does a lot in social engineering. And so as I started getting more familiar with the space, I was actually really fascinated with it, because a lot of times, at least for me, my initial thought was, you're running IT security, making sure your updates and patches are current, and, making sure your firewall is effective, type of a thing. But to your earlier point on, that's actually one of the lowest threats to an organization, if I'm hearing you correctly.
I think so, yeah. And that's why I decided to focus on Riot, because I was exactly like this. I thought hackers are doing clever stuff like hijacking. And
because we've all watched those spy movies, where they break into the server room and they're, whatever, and hacking your system, type of a thing.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not what's happening in the real world. It's not like this. Most of the time, it's a phishing email and something like this. Most of the attacks.
So I'm curious your take on this, because since you've been in the space for a bit, do you think some of that is a shift as things moved more towards the cloud? And I ask just because I can see back in the day, and I remember even just my friend who's in the space, there's still a lot of vulnerabilities, but he's shared that in organizations where they still have a lot of stuff that's on-prem, or they're doing a lot of local he goes, there's a lot more vulnerabilities to stuff. But when companies are more cloud-based, a lot of the cybersecurity, at least the hyper-technical stuff, it's a bit out of their hands, because that's the point of the SaaS, is the SaaS is taking care of a lot of that. There's still things you have to monitor, but has that shifted things?
I think attacks are evolving, but the risk is pretty much the same. It will only get worse with AI, but we'll probably come to that later. But
we'll get to that one.
I don't think on-prem is more secure than in the cloud. But you're probably relying and sharing more data with cloud companies, so the data breaches are um, much more damaging when they happen. They actually happen. So
I suppose that's true. Yeah, as you assess the risk of it, keeping things on prem, you're more concerned about are you up to date and all this other stuff, but a hacker would have to specifically seek out your company to target it versus in the cloud. Yes, the SaaS is more responsible for protecting the company information, but if somebody goes, "Hey, I'm going to hack Salesforce or I'm going to hack Workday," I can get data from tons and tons and tons of companies versus like having to specifically target one.
it's more centralized. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So
So the risk is bigger because if they hit one of these big ones, they can pull potentially a lot more data.
exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
And
So
so that's also why it's happening more to small businesses now, because in the past
oh,
they were not specifically targeting small businesses. They were focusing on bigger companies because the reward is better. But now that you
yeah,
have
the effort for a hacker to seek out a small to medium sized business, it's first of all, they're probably not on anybody's radar. And even if they are, the value of specifically trying to target that isn't super high. But now that they're all on these SaaS platforms, yeah, that does make sense that the shift would be going more towards small, medium businesses.
exactly,
And
and
they
they're not
probably don't have the resources to fight it the
exactly.
same
In,
way a big
yeah, the
company
big
can.
enterprise companies who have 1,000 employee security team.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
So
So
it's been switching to smaller businesses lately,
really,
probably
so I was
in
going to
the
say,
last
so
five
from a
years. Yeah.
market standpoint, is that where you're seeing more vulnerabilities and things like that? Where, I mean, again, it's still hitting the big companies, but is that just almost newer territory for companies then?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So, and they are not as prepared as the big ones. So the paycheck is lower, much lower. Usually hackers that are targeting small businesses, they're looking for $100,000, something like this. But it's still, if you do it on 10 different companies in the day, it's still worth it. So
Well, and again, going back to, I'm just thinking of some of the dynamics of this. To your point, it's funny that we're talking about $100,000. Like that's no big deal, right? Like that's a small breach. But to your point, if you're able to target 10 companies easily at 100 grand, you're talking $1 million pretty quick. And again, those small to medium businesses are going to be more vulnerable because they're going to be less prepared. They're going to have less resources to fight it back and do this other stuff. They're going to catch it slower, type of a thing. I mean, at least in theory, probably the reward, while smaller, is a much easier reward to get.
and that's also so obviously when it happened to me in my previous company, I looked at other solutions on the market, and most cybersecurity companies I looked at, they were targeting enterprise customers. They were not
Okay.
targeting small businesses. They don't want to do it. It was not worth the effort. If you can sign a half a million deal instead of small businesses would pay 5K a year, it's not worth it. So that's where I found something. I thought those
So
big
is that your
companies,
market?
they
Is that who you're really targeting then? Is trying to
uh,
help those small to medium sized businesses
it,
that they're not the big enterprise?
yeah, I think we built a solution that's easy to use, and that's where you can sign up and don't talk to a salesperson, um, which is very different from the competition. So it's
Okay.
very easy to set up Riot. Probably you can launch your first attack in the next 5 to 10 minutes,
Really?
um, which is very different from the companies I looked at.
Oh, a big enterprise
Just
deal? You can't
yeah,
do anything
yeah,
in a month.
yeah, exactly. You're not gonna try anything in a month, but yeah,
No, no, maybe by next quarter, if you're lucky and you
exactly,
can get the stars to align, you might be able to pull it off on a big enterprise. But yeah, I guess a small business, you need that flexibility to be able to do something about it like this week.
exactly. And so when I started Riot, I chatted with LVMH, which is probably the biggest company in France. I chatted
Right.
with the person in charge at LVMH, and she told me, "You're too late. We just bought this solution. I don't remember it exactly, but it was a big one, like $1 billion worth company." So And she told me, we just bought it, and so in 2 years we'll be equipped. And I thought, what do you mean 2 years? What's happening in the next 2 years? And she said, yeah, it takes 2 years to set it up. And I'm like, so
Two
for two
years to set
years,
up the solution?
yeah. And I was like, what do you mean? You're not going to be safe for the next 2 years? That's what you're telling me? It's going to take
Wow.
2 years to actually deploy the solution. That's crazy.
Okay.
And I've talked with them recently, and they still haven't deployed it. So it's been 3 years and a half. So
Okay. That's a long time, especially in technical time. That's a long time to go vulnerable.
I think so.
Okay.
But yeah.
Okay. So, other than some of the things we've talked about, are there other things that you've seen in terms of how things have changed? And we'll get to the AI conversation, but I am curious, how you've seen so definitely I hear you talking about the shift from big enterprise. And again, our big enterprise is still vulnerable, but this is now hitting, small to medium businesses. Hang on, let me switch my camera. There we go. Small to medium businesses, much heavier. Are there other trends that you're seeing happen right now?
And then we don't talk about AI. So except AI, right?
We'll get to that. We'll get to that one.
Something else that I think we're the first one exploring is digital footprint. And so we're investing a lot on how do you reduce the digital footprint of the employees. So I'll give you an example, but an attack that we've seen again and again is a hacker would leverage LinkedIn and watch for new employees in your company, and they would target those employees on their first few days.
Really?
Yeah, and they would send a message or even call the employee, pretending to be the support team or the IT team or something like this, and they would try to get their passwords with this method. And
So on LinkedIn, the posting like, "Hey, I just started a new job at blah 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 blah."
I would not do that.
Really?
I would not do it. I mean, not on my first day. I would wait. I mean, internally, I would suggest that employees wait for at least a month before posting that.
Okay. Okay.
I would actually wait that they complete their awareness program, the first few courses of the awareness program before actually doing it.
Okay. So is that something, because again, as a learning leader in this and folks who are thinking about this, would this be something then, because a lot of companies have new hire orientation, where they're doing this kind of, is it growing? Are you seeing enough of that growing around kind of the social, again, this is in the social engineering space. So people are seeing like, hey, you made this update. Great. Now's a great time to reach out. Is it something worth calling out? Because inevitably, you can't, as an organization, control somebody's social media activity. So you can't force people not to do something. But if you can at least discourage it or create greater awareness, going back to what we talked about before with some of the, like, just having a heightened awareness that, hey, just so you know, if you choose to do this, you are making yourself more vulnerable to people potentially targeting you, going, oh, so if magically somebody from the support team reaches out to you, but I would think that'd be a tough one to distinguish, because how are they going to know whether that's real or not?
It's a good question. So we're having this question a lot. But basically, what we're doing is that we're scrapping the LinkedIn profile of the employee. And we're detecting how we can, or the employee can actually configure its privacy settings to be less permissive. So basically, you're sharing way too many informations. As the default settings on LinkedIn are much more way too permissive, and you can hide a few things that will not damage your experience on LinkedIn, and will greatly improve the security of your company and even your security.
Okay.
So
are there any other? I'm actually really curious, because I use LinkedIn all the time, all this other stuff. So I'm curious, are there any other ones? So obviously posting like, hey, I just started a new job on day one.
Something that's very easy that I will suggest is hiding your last name.
Okay.
So basically, on the privacy settings on LinkedIn, you know the first level, the second level, and the third level. You know what it is?
Yep.
So first level is who you're connected with, and second level is people you're connected with, connections. And then the third level, we calculated that's on average, it's about 100 million people. So the
Really?
third level is very, very permissive. And so we're just hiding the last name to the third level, basically.
Okay. So people that are in that first and second degree, they can see who your,
So the
last name
expense is pretty much the same. You're just hiding it to hackers. I think
Okay.
that's good enough. So
Yeah. No, interesting. So, okay. So the last name thing, which again, I can see this being, I can see the education of helping people understand the risk and evaluate it would be a really important piece, because you are treading in some interesting territory, because part of your professional brand is also creating awareness to people who don't know who you are to know who you are. I mean, that's
yeah,
part of it, is making sure people who don't know you do this. But then there's this risk of, yeah, but how far do you want to take that?
exactly. And we're trying to, I mean, you don't want to be completely hidden from LinkedIn. LinkedIn is still very useful if you need to find a new job or if you need to be to work on your personal branding. But you just have to be aware that hackers are leveraging LinkedIn more than ever to create spear phishing attacks.
Well, I do know that, I don't know if you've seen this, but LinkedIn recently added like government verification on the platform, where, for your profile, you can verify that you're an actual person. I know they've been doing a ton to cut down on fake accounts and bot accounts type of a thing. So yeah, it obviously must be a growing area of opportunity where people are like, hey, this is a really great place to find information on people related to businesses that we can then leverage and then exploit.
Except that most of the time hackers, they're using
Hacked
accounts
accounts.
that are, yeah, exactly, not their accounts. So they would send you a phishing attack and get your LinkedIn password, and then leverage your LinkedIn account to hack other people.
So over the years, I'm actually really curious on this, because you see all these things, you see all these different phishing things, you watch the trends. You shared some of the stuff that's starting to grow, which the LinkedIn one makes sense. So some awareness. Are there any other ones that stand out that you go, yeah, this is one that you're seeing more start to pick up, or that's jumping out that maybe was new, or it's a different flavor? I feel like there's nothing new under the sun, but there's like different flavors of it where people are going, oh, that's a creative way to do it.
Deepfakes, but it's related to AI, so maybe we'll wait
Well,
to
let's
talk about
transition
it.
to the AI one.
Okay,
Let's
okay.
transition to the AI piece, and then if other things come up,
But
because I'm
deepfake is a
curious.
big one. So with
Deepfakes.
generative AI, it's much easier to recreate your voice,
Okay.
and then I can probably using Facebook, I can probably detect who's your wife, and then I can using a data breach, I can probably find her number, and then I can call your wife or send her a voice message over WhatsApp with the number I just bought and with your face in the profile picture, and send her a voice message saying, hey, it's Christopher, can you help me with that and this and that, and or can you do the wire transfer or something like this with your exact voice. I mean, you know how what's the sample size to train a model on your voice?
Oh, I mean, I've got an app that has an AI version of my voice, and I think it took, I think it needed like 2 to 3 minutes of my voice, and it has a full
A few
vernacular of
seconds.
that
Yeah,
sounds exactly like me.
yeah, yeah. A few
So for
seconds of your
folks, so
voice.
for folks who may not be familiar with the deep fake thing, let's unpack that a little bit, because I think this is an emerging space. And I've done several videos on YouTube. I don't think I've done them on LinkedIn, talking about some of the very near-term risks that, not that we need to be afraid of, but that we need to be more aware of, so that we can be paying closer attention to this stuff. Because going back to our examples earlier, it's when you're not paying attention that you just get taken, because you just aren't looking, type of a thing. So when you're talking about deep fakes, you're talking about using generative AI to take clips of people's voices and quickly create an AI version of it, which there's a ton, especially in L&D. Everybody listening and watching, you're probably familiar with some of these apps where you can create an AI voice from someone's real voice and then create content off of this, which has a lot of practical uses, but can also be, to the situation you described, a bit terrifying.
Exactly. And so, have you heard about this story about this mother who gets a call from her daughter in Arizona? Have you heard about this?
Yes.
It's a crazy one. So she gets a call from her daughter saying, "I'm in trouble. I've been kidnapped." And then someone talks and say, "You need to wire transfer $1 million to our account, or we will kill your daughter today." And then
So I've
it's exactly
heard about
the
that,
voice
and
of,
it's actually not as rare as sometimes people think. It's becoming more and more. In fact, I know someone that it happened to, where they got a phone call from who they thought was a relative, and they didn't do the kidnapping ploy, but they did do something else. They had like some situation, they'd lost their wallet, they were doing something because they were traveling for work, and they got a call saying, "I lost my wallet. Can you transfer some money to this so that I can do it?" And the person fell for it. I mean, because they were just like, oh yeah, no problem. Let me get you something. And they just gave them the information and boom, transferred money. And then that was it. And then the person finally contacted him and goes, "What are you talking about? I never called you."
how much money was it?
The thing was, it's funny. I'm thinking back to these transactions where you said small businesses have a lower transaction threshold. So it wasn't a ton because it had to be believable. It was like several $1,000s. Can you send me several $1,000s quickly? But if you think about it, the person didn't even blink at doing it.
Yeah.
They were just like, "Oh yeah, sure, no problem. You're stuck overseas. Like, let me send you some money." And they did it, not realizing like that was completely fraudulent. Like there was nothing real about that.
And you know how they discovered that he was traveling?
I'm guessing, I don't know for sure, but my guess is he probably posted on LinkedIn that
Digital footprint.
I'm going to this event, I'm going to this conference.
Yeah.
And so the person knew they were going to be out of town. And so they reached out to their contacts and said, "Hey, I'm out of town at this conference and I lost my," because they knew enough information to sound viable.
Yeah. That's actually a good example. It's a good example of why digital footprint matters. And the good advice is always to, we say that a lot, but alternative channel, so side channel. You're trying to verify the information using a side channel. So if someone calls you, you hang up and you call back to the phone number or something like this, and you're verifying that it's actually true. Another one that I teach a lot is the safe word advice.
I had one of these growing up, by the way.
Yeah.
I remember this. My parents and I had a word that if anybody ever came and picked me up, they had to say a certain word type of thing, which felt at the time, I mean, I remember that was back when Jacob Wetterling had just been kidnapped. And so it was this whole big thing. But I remember having the word that if anybody came to school to pick me up, I had to make sure that I said it.
And so you have one with your kids?
We do. Yeah.
Okay, that's good. I don't have kids, so I don't have the problem. But
yeah, you don't.
no
I have a bunch of them, so we have to think about this stuff all the time.
Exactly. So yeah, you have to be careful with kids.
Okay.
And
so
I mean,
what do you see?
They post everything on TikTok, on Instagram, on YouTube. I don't know.
Well, that's the thing.
Do your kids have a YouTube channel too, or they don't?
No, so again, and what's funny about this, and I'm really curious where you sit on the risk spectrum, because you start thinking about some of this stuff, it's a little easy to get panicked, right? It's a little easy to freak out and go over the top. So we sit kind of in the middle on the risk spectrum. But I mean, my kids are all under 12. So for me, social media and stuff, I'm like, you're too young. You don't need to be on social media, and you don't need to do all this other stuff. You can have friends, you can talk to people, but we're not going to get you on the interwebs, at this point type of thing. But obviously I'm very open about my family. So somebody who's smart would be able to pick some of that stuff up, but they wouldn't be able to, target things the same way they could if my kids, like you said, were on TikTok or had a YouTube channel and were posting stuff all the time.
Exactly. So, but they're gonna grow and they're gonna need a TikTok for school or something like that to be connected with friends. So it's gonna happen. You're gonna have the problem.
So is the deep fake now at this point? I'm curious if you're seeing this yet, because I do a ton of stuff with AI right now, and the voice is incredibly accurate. I mean, it's the one thing that's interesting is I've tested this with people where I've had an AI version where it said something and then I said something, and people who knew me could tell it wasn't me because they're like, the way you articulate things, the way you say the words you choose to use, they're like, I can tell that that's not you. But like I had ChatGPT write something, and then I had it recorded with my AI voice, and then I said something, and then I asked somebody to guess which one was me and which one was AI. And from a sound standpoint, people couldn't tell the difference. But from people were able to go, that's not something, like, I just know you well enough. You would never say things like that. This is not the way you would talk, type of a thing. But I think this goes back to many people we interact with, we don't really know.
Yeah.
Especially on the professional side.
On the professional side, I would imagine that you can replicate the voice of a CEO. In your company, for example, with 6,000 employees, probably most of them, they've never actually talked to the CEO directly.
No.
And I mean, the CEO usually is it's usually public, meaning that their voice are on videos all the time.
Oh yeah, there's a video of a press interview or something somewhere that you could easily capture and then take a voice print.
So what happens if the finance team, someone in the finance team gets a WhatsApp message where there's the picture of the CEO and they don't know the number, obviously, but the CEO is sending a voice message and the voice is perfect. The voice is exactly the voice of the CEO. And the CEO is asking for a wire transfer. What would you do? I mean, you're probably, and especially if it's a new hire. So what happens in that case?
Okay. So let's talk how do you mitigate some of this stuff? Because the reality is, going back to what I said before, you could freak out about it and you could go delete all of your internet presence and never leave your house and build a bunker in your backyard, and you'd have a pretty miserable existence. So that's not what I would advocate for folks in any way, shape, or form. But I am curious, so what are things that you've seen work really well to help people mitigate some of this stuff? And granted, I get it's new territory, but really even what we're talking about is just a refreshed version of what's been done before. I mean, deep fakes, it's literally the phishing email, just you've upped the quality of what it does to make it seem more authentic. So really it's the same thing. It's using the same psychological tactics to try and get you to do something, just you've upped the ante.
I think what really changed lately is that you can do that at scale. And this is new. I mean, if I wanted to target you, Christopher, and look for who are your kids or the name of your wife, the phone number of your wife, and launch an attack on your wife. In the past, it was very difficult to find the details, and I would have to do that manually. And now there are scripts that you can use that can do that automatically. So I just give you, I can give an email and find the name associated to the email, and then and automatically find the number of your wife and so on, and do that at scale. I mean, I can do that automatically on 5,000 people today.
So going back to, and again, I'm just thinking from a scale standpoint, everything we've been talking about leading up to this point is, you start targeting small businesses or individuals, the payoff is much lower. So scalability used to be a bigger barrier because it was like, well, it's too time intensive to do this because we can't actually do that at scale to justify it. It's better for us to focus on the big targets. But now, and I would say AI probably largely is contributing to this because you can automate actually a lot of this stuff to happen. Suddenly now that lower dollar target, well, if you can hit 1 million of those people, you can get a bigger payday than you could if you went for one big target.
And so you're going to be targeted much more often now.
Okay.
So it's going to increase and it's going to move down the long tail, probably.
Okay.
I think so. So smaller companies need to be better prepared, and they need to have the tools to actually be prepared.
Okay. So what are you seeing is working combat some of this stuff? Because I think largely one of the biggest challenges we have in front of us is the last year or so has moved, and I think this is just one of the biggest risks of AI in general, is things are moving so much more fast than they have in the past. I mean, things are just accelerating so quickly. What are you seeing is working? Because not only do I see you needing to improve and help organizations, but I almost feel like helping professionals and individuals just have greater awareness that this stuff is real, it's scalable, there are ways that you can't avoid it, but there are ways you can mitigate those risks.
Exactly, and we're trying to. I mean, that's exactly what we're trying to do. There's no silver bullet. Obviously, there's not something that's going to fix the security of your company or your security. What we're trying to do is we always do the same. So we're trying to detect a vulnerability on the employee side and bring the employee to actually fix it. And we're trying to be a platform where we can actually justify that we fixed the vulnerabilities. And this is completely new in our space on the awareness, cybersecurity awareness space. I don't know which tool you're using in your company, but I would imagine it's a video probably sent to all employees. It's always the same video, probably followed by a quiz, and that's it. And our approach is really different because we're gathering a ton of data and we're adapting the content of our course because it's not a video, it's chat-based.
Okay.
And because it's text-based, we can actually very easily adapt the content of it. And we adapt the content so that we bring from the data, we bring a course that is tailor-made for each employee.
Okay. And so you're personalizing it by the individual rather than, and I think this is a really important piece with this, rather than this generic, like, hey, here, everybody be aware of this stuff. You're kind of targeting, and some of the things you shared earlier, you're scrubbing even when breaches happen. So you know who are the more vulnerable people to be able to connect with them and say, hey, here's some stuff that we, in the learning industry, we call it just-in-time learning, right? Like, it's a little more just in time going, this is actually more relevant to you right now than it normally would be for these reasons.
Exactly. And I mean, we're trying to create a wake-up call too. Okay. So an example that I usually give is, we've talked about data breaches a lot, but something else that we do is that we capture the last known password by hackers. So basically, we would leverage the data breaches and find the data breaches where your password actually leaked. We're capturing this password and we're showing it to the employee. So instead of saying, hey, Christopher, you've been in the Tumblr data breach where your password leaked, we would say, hey, Christopher, you remember this password, and your password would be something like, I don't know.
Yeah, password 123, like a lot of people.
The name of your first kid or something like this.
Yeah, something ridiculous.
Lemonade, Wisconsin, or something like this. We would put it to your face and say, hey, you remember this password, Christopher? It took us a second to actually retrieve it. So now you have to change it everywhere. And that's actually very different from the state of the art, where we would say, hey, this is what a data breach is. Be careful. Something like this, you know?
Okay. Well, and I think this goes back to something that hopefully folks listening to this, and Boss, I saw your question, so I'll ask that as well. But I think this does get back to people need some of that context, and they need to have that call to action on some of this. Because to your point, if you just tell someone Tumblr just had a data breach, the average person just goes, like, okay, I have no idea what that means or anything like that, versus a personalized message of, hey, this information was where, again, going back to it. And I'm curious how you've balanced this, because I think sometimes when you're in your own industry, you get really excited about the stuff that nobody else actually cares about. You know, so you want to share all this. Oh, well, there was this data breach and this is what happened in the data breach. And like the average person is like, yeah, I don't care about this stuff. What do you want me to do with it? So a lot of times the effort goes into this, you know, all this big picture stuff. And people are like, okay, but instead you're going, here's the deal. This data got breached. Passwords were involved. Your password, this password, is now out on the open market. So you need to go out and make sure that that password is not being used anywhere else, because if that password is out of a Tumblr breach, any good hacker is going to go, well, this person is on all these other platforms. I'm going to go ahead and try and see if they use that same password elsewhere, just knowing human behavior that most people use the same password all over the place.
Exactly. That's exactly it. So basically they're using it everywhere. So it takes a long time, but it's worth the investment. I mean, otherwise, yeah, you're gonna get hacked a lot if you don't change it.
Okay. So one thing, and then boss, I want to ask your question. What's your take on the two-step verification in terms of that? Do you find that to be something that is worth the hassle in terms of things? Okay.
Very important.
I'm very much so, but I was curious from a cybersecurity person, because my wife, it drives her nuts. She's like, I hate the fact that whenever I need to do something, I know you have to go to your authenticator app, or you have to, like, you get a text message to validate type of a thing. And she's like, it's just a pain. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't want anybody breaking into any of my stuff. And the fact that I get a notification on my watch every time somebody taps something has saved me on multiple occasions.
I kind of agree with her. I think it's annoying.
It is.
And it's probably a temporary solution. And I mean, what's next? Are we going to get a third factor authentication? I don't know. But we're going to need a better solution. But it's probably temporary. And it's the best solution we have right now. So that's actually a good example, because we've been working with very early we've been working with Le Monde at Riot. So Le Monde is like the New York Times in France. It's a company with 2,000 people, not tech savvy at all. And they don't have, they had a big project of rolling out two-factor authentication. So you have 2,000 people, and you need to activate, you need to teach them why it matters and why it's important by default.
Oh yeah, because to most people it just seems like an annoyance.
It seems very annoying, and so what we did is that actually we can because we deeply connect with Google Workspace, we know which employees have two-factor authentication activated, and the ones that don't, and so we can target our course or only on those employees, the ones that don't have two-factor authentication activated. And we can track that we actually add an impact because we're guiding the employees to activate it. And then we know how many of them actually activated the two-factor authentication. And it can be for a big company, probably a company like yours. It's a pain to actually migrate users from one-factor authentication to two-factor authentication.
It is. I mean, I'm friends with our CIO, and I know that it's not easy to get people to shift and be like, wait, so now every time I log in, I have to get a text message validating, and I have to put this code in, and it feels like a lot of steps. But again, when you understand the overall risk that you're mitigating, because it is a very effective mitigation strategy, because it's like, well, you actually have to be the person to validate the login.
There's no better solution right now. So yeah, you have to teach it.
We're just going to have to hustle through it.
Another one that we should talk about is passcodes on mobile phones. I mean, a mobile phone.
Like the you know,
how long is it?
The one that you, like, when you swipe up, you got to type in your passcode thing.
Exactly. How long is it? How long is yours?
6.
6 is good, but most people, they have 4, and 4 is very easy to steal. I mean, I'm at a bar. I just look over your shoulder, and that's it. I know your passcode. And
and if you get somebody's mobile device and you know how to get into it,
that's
game over. Because most apps, you can even, I mean, a lot of even banking apps and stuff like that they just automatically log you into stuff.
and two-factor authentication doesn't work anymore because I have your phone and I can capture your two-factor authentication codes. So it doesn't work anymore. So a
Okay.
mobile phone is, yeah, very
Okay.
sensitive.
So are you suggesting that this is one of the biggest data risks or one of the
I
biggest
mean,
data risks to people's
the difference is that
security?
it's not scalable. I would have to be at a bar. I would have to steal your phone. So
Yeah.
probably not as big of a risk. But if I want
Okay.
to target you, Christopher, I know I can find very easily where you live, and I can go to your probably the closest bar to your place and find you
Well,
there. And
no,
on a
but you
Friday
won't bump
night,
into me anywhere around me because, unless you come on my property, in which case then I'd be like, well, Benjamin, what are you doing at my house?
I'm here for your phone. I'm here to
Right. I
make
live
sure
on
that you
top of a
change
hill. I've
your.
got my sniper scope ready just for anybody that approaches the property.
Okay, good to know. Good to know for your listeners. Don't go
That's right.
to your house.
Not getting
Um,
in. That's
but
that's
you
so
get my
funny.
point. I mean,
I know, I totally do.
you're in a very fancy bar in downtown Chicago, and there's probably VIPs there, and that's probably a good target for hackers too.
Okay. Okay. So last question I want to make sure I get to from Boss is, and I don't know that we can unpack this, but as you look at all these AI companies spinning up that have a lot of these capabilities, and they're literally handing them over to people just with really no consideration. What kind of role do you see some of these companies having in actually helping fight against some of this stuff? Because that is, I mean, it's a real risk. If you have a company and you're like, hey, what harm could we possibly do? You may be actually enabling some of this stuff at scale.
I think it's too late. So
It's too
no,
late.
yeah, I mean most of those models are available open source, so
Okay.
you're not gonna stop that anymore. You're
Okay.
gonna have to adapt. Um, and yeah, I mean, GPT-4 is not OpenAI is not available as an open source model, but the Llama 2, the last
Yep.
Facebook model, Meta model, sorry, is available. So and it's pretty good. It's good enough to create phishing attacks. So
Okay. Okay.
you're not gonna stop that anymore.
Well, I feel like that's, some of the thing. And again, do I think there's room for greater, I hate to say regulate our way out of the AI crisis because we can't keep up with it. It's moving too fast for us to do. The train has left the station. But
It's very European of you
is
to
it?
think about regulation. How do we regulate? I mean, we're experts in regulation, so it's
Well, but
very
what I'm
European.
saying is, I think there should be some degree of guardrails. I haven't even my opinion on where we draw that line is very blurry because, again, just like you said, the stuff is open source. Like a kid in your basement can be building some of this stuff, and you have no idea what's happening. I had a guest on here, and he's built his own. What he would go so far as to say is like conscious AI type of a thing on his laptop. So it's one of those things, to your point, trying to say, well, maybe if we put the right regulations in place, we can fix this. We can't. I think I very much like your takeaway with this is everybody has to take this as a personal responsibility of going, what can I do about it? How do I keep my awareness of what's going on, at least on the cutting edge of things? How am I, as annoying as two-factor authentication is, maybe for those really
You have to
critical
do it.
things, like just do it. It might be annoying, but look, do you want to risk your entire, personal life being put out on the interwebs or type of a thing? So,
Yeah, exactly.
okay.
You have to start somewhere. I mean, there's no silver bullet, as I said, so you got to start somewhere.
Okay.
Two-factor
All right.
authentication is a good option if you want to start somewhere.
Yeah. No, it is. Because again, the password thing can be tough because you're like, well, good grief, I don't even know half the passwords that I have because they're all over and they're saved in your browser and all this other stuff. But you flip on two-factor on all your major things,
Yeah.
you'd be surprised. And I've actually been surprised how many times it's caught stuff where I've
Yeah.
gotten a notification going, is this you? And I'm like, it's not me. And then it catches it and shuts it down real quick.
That's because you're a public figure, maybe? Do you think it's related?
I don't consider myself a public figure, but I guess it could be I'm more public than probably some people are.
Yeah, probably.
Okay. All right. Well, Benjamin, this has been absolutely a fun conversation for me. I've enjoyed this,
For
and
me too.
hopefully folks listening and watching either now or later, really in many regards, I think your point, Benjamin, of folks, you need to take responsibility for some of this. You can't wait for your company to fix it for you. You can't wait for regulatory bodies to fix it for you. That it's here. What you need to do is just be better prepared for it. So thank you for bringing your perspective.
There's no other options.
Yeah,
thanks for having me, Christopher.
All right. Well, thanks everybody. Have a great rest of your week, and we will see you back here next week.